My boyfriend says it's his boundary that when I'm out with my friends, that I text or call him every hour. Is that a boundary? No, that's not a boundary. That is control. Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Show. So in this episode, I'm going to be reviewing when to set a boundary or know when one is needed, because this has been a question I get over and over. A lot of you have mentioned that you don't know when it's appropriate to set a boundary because unhealthy behavior was normalized in your family of origin. So we're going to go over all five types of boundaries and some ways that you might want to consider setting boundaries, especially if you are a high-functioning codependent. So why don't we move it on into today's episode? Questions. And a lot of what I'm basing this is the questions that you guys have had in the comments about boundaries and being identified as an HFC. So one of the big questions people have is, when is it okay to set a boundary? Right? Like, are my needs actually reasonable? Is what I want too much? Is a lot of the questions. And I say, as long as you're on your side of the street and you're not using the term boundaries as like a way of controlling someone, I think you're good. So what is the difference between boundaries, a boundary request, and an attempt to control? I had someone on the interweb say to me, my boyfriend says it's his boundary that when I'm out with my friends, that I text or call him every hour. Is that a boundary? No, that's not a boundary. Because a boundary is something you do for yourself, right? That is control. That's someone who's trying to control you because they feel insecure that you're out with your friends, is what it sounds like to me. So, and you may have a boundary. The boundary that could be drawn when that person made that request is she could have put a limit on that and saying, I'm not comfortable with that. I'll call you when I get where I'm going, and I'll text you when I'm leaving to come home, right? Like, so she could have countered that to try to give them something, right? If you know your partner's insecure and you're not trying to make them more insecure, but you still don't want to be manipulated by that. So anyway, that's an example of the difference between a boundary and someone trying to exert control or coercive control over you. Let's just break it down, because this is a little bit like Boundaries 101. Because, I haven't talked about the foundations of boundaries in a long time, and I think it can be helpful to revisit. So different types of boundaries. We have physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, material boundaries, emotional boundaries, and mental boundaries. So what is physical boundaries? Is your body, right? This is your biggest physical boundary is your body. And so you have ideas about how close you want someone to stand to you, or to sit to you, or to walk behind you. You may not maybe you like a handshake instead of a hug, maybe you like neither. Right? We all will have our preferences when it comes to our physical boundaries. This is why you have some people who are very affectionate and will touch strangers. I hate to say I am that person. I am that person. Sometimes it comes back to bite you when you are that person. Because when I was 19, I was out to breakfast with my mother in a very small town in upstate New York, where my mother lives, at the cafe that was right down the street from her house. And the waitress came over, and I put my hand on her belly and I smiled at her. I touched her belly. And she said, yeah, I'm trying to lose it. Okay, so I thought she was pregnant, but she was not. And my mother was like, oh my God, Terri, did you just touch her stomach and basically say you think she's pregnant? I was like, apparently I did. Anyway, that was the last time I ever touched someone's stomach without their permission. That was very embarrassing, though. Then we have sexual boundaries. So that's how you like to be touched sexually. What are your sexual boundaries? This could also have to do with sexting, right? Are you comfortable being sexual? If you're in a long distance relationship and the person wants to, have sex over Zoom, I don't even know, maybe I'm just old, but I don't even know how people would do that. But I know people do it. So that's someone who, if that doesn't overstep a boundary. But what I find a lot of times with my therapy clients in dating is that they'll meet someone who wants to be sexual early, or who is already being flirty, but in a sexual way. Like, oh, I don't know, Was I being a bad boy? Right. So one of my clients had someone who was like, oh, wait, was that naughty? Like question mark. And she was like, I do not like that. Like already there is something. And then she immediately, because she had good boundaries, was like, yeah, that's too soon. Too soon for wherever you're going. That doesn't work for me. It was like, oh, sorry about that. But the thing is, it already sometimes tells you about the person or what they have in mind. So I think that we need to know our physical boundaries. We need to know our sexual boundaries. And then if you move into material boundaries, it's how you like your stuff, how you keep your things, whether you lend money or not, whether you lend your car or not, right? Some people, they keep their cars pristine. Other people's cars are like a dump pit, right? They're literally like going to the dump. None of it is wrong as long as you're keeping your things the way that you like them. Where boundaries come in is if you lend your car to your cousin and they leave a bunch of fast food wrappers in your pristine car, right? That's a boundary violation of a material style where you would have to ask them, hey, if you want to borrow my car. But someone who keeps their car that clean is also not that likely to want to lend their car to anybody. But anyway, you get my point with the material boundaries. And the same thing with lending money, right? It's really material comes into there. It's like I say financial boundaries fall under the material. And this is something that people find very difficult to say no to, even though most people want to say no when someone wants to borrow money from them, only because it gets complicated so fast and it's terrible for relationships. And so I always tell my clients, hey, you can just say, listen, I just have a no lending policy because it's how I protect my relationships. It's not personal. It's just my policy, which can make it easier not to do it and then stick to it. Don't lend anybody money. It's complicated. And trust me, if you don't, they'll figure it out. If you got abducted by aliens and had no bank account, they would go somewhere else for it, unless you're like a banker or you want to have a contract with them. But most people don't do that. They feel pressured into lending the money. They lend the money. And then when the other person doesn't pay back the money, but then suddenly is going to Atlantic City for the weekend, the person who lended the money is pissed. And how much control do you have of what people do when they don't pay you back? You're like, wait, you're going on vacation, but you still owe me $4,000? Like, how is that happening? It is such a setup for problems. So my feeling is, don't lend. If someone needs money from me, if I cannot afford to give you the money, if I can afford to give it to you, I'll give it to you, no strings attached. You can have it. I don't want the energetic connection to the unpaid money. I don't want that between us. But if I can't afford to give it, I'm definitely not lending it. You know what I mean? All right, move into emotional boundaries. And this is really the biggest struggle for high functioning codependents, right? Because we are typically empaths. We absorb other people's emotions. We feel other people's emotions. Like, I wonder if people really understand. I feel like I should do a whole episode on being an empath and what it really means, because we talk about it a lot. People really know what it actually means to be an empath and the life that we live when we are. And then couple it with being a highly sensitive person. Oh my God, it's exhausting. And it's also my superpower. So it's a lot though, right? We feel, when you're a high functioning codependent and an empath, you feel other people's pain. And now you feel responsible for getting rid of that pain, for making them happy. We feel responsible for the way other people feel, what they're experiencing, which then gets us all tangled up in other people's lives in a way that is unhealthy and really is bad for everyone, bad for the relationships, but bad for the other person, because all of the auto advice giving, what is that doing for our relationships when we're telling people what to do? And we feel like they really should be doing what we say. All of this and these types of disordered boundaries are bad. Anytime you find yourself thinking, oh, I don't want this person to think, or I don't want this person to feel, that's your cue to back up and get back to your side of the street with the realization that how they feel and what they think is their responsibility, not yours. It is more than enough for you to manage how you feel and to know what you think. And so much of the time we don't. So I think that's where we should focus our attention. And then the last is of the 5 types of boundaries, right? We've done physical, sexual, material, emotional, and the last one is mental, which is basically knowing what you think, being able to hold on to your opinion, even if you're talking to other people who disagree with what you think, right? It's knowing who you are. Having good mental boundaries means we know who we are. We know what's right and wrong. We know what we think, and we're willing to stand up for that, even if it's unpopular. When you have good mental and emotional boundaries, if someone is telling an off-color joke that's offensive to you, you say something. You don't laugh and go along to get along. You go, nah, not for me. I don't like that. Or that's what I would say. Or I put my hand up. Those of you watching on YouTube, you can see. And I'll just say, yeah, no thanks. I'm good. I don't need any of that. No, thank you. Right? So I find a way of stopping the person without making it super confrontational. But I gotta say, I can't sit there anymore and say nothing like I would have done when I was 20, or 25 even. So those are the 5 types. And then we look and say, what are the styles of boundaries, right? You could have boundaries that are too rigid, right? They're too hard, which is you're the person that if somebody hurts your feelings, you're more likely to cut them off, or you're more likely to be withdrawn in anger to show your displeasure to that person than you are to tell them the truth about how you feel. Then you have, so that's too hard boundaries or too rigid. And then you have porous boundaries, which are too malleable. They're too soft. They're too porous. That's exactly what the word means, where like you can almost see through them, And what does that mean? That's more of like being the pushover or the peacekeeper. And then, of course, what we desire is healthy boundaries, which is, that's the sweet spot in the middle, which means you know who you are and you know and value and assert your preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers. So if you're confused about any of this, or if you haven't taken the boundary quiz, it's so good. Just go to boundaryquiz.com and it'll tell you what boundary archetype you are. And then come back into the comments on YouTube, and you can do it on Instagram, and tell me what you found out about your boundary archetype. I want to know, boundaryquiz.com. In the meantime, let's talk about when to know how to set boundaries, because I think this is a big question that people have. You have to tune into your body, because I promise you, when you need to set a boundary, even if you don't say anything in that moment, when that person in your meeting made that douchey comment, something happened in your body. And if you think back, you'd be able to go, oh my God, yeah, like I did have a constriction in my chest, or I had a pain in my head, or my throat got tight, or my mouth got dry, or whatever. But our body, there's so much wisdom in our bodies. It's always there for us. So the more you honor your boundaries, and the more you know yourself, and the more you care about your own preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers, the more easily you're going to be able to recognize when a boundary has been crossed. And the more spontaneously you're going to be able to manage it. In the beginning, it's like we're doing everything after the fact, right? Because it feels, at least for me, it was too threatening to do it like in real time, So, but after the fact was okay. The more you do it, the easier it is to do it in real time. So if you're wanting to know where you need boundaries, or where you're self-abandoning, right? Where you're not speaking up, you're going to do a quick resentment inventory, because this really does serve as a GPS to get you to where you need to set better boundaries as an HFC or not, right? Resentment is incredibly helpful for us to understand our own resentment and where we're feeling resentful. And let's talk about just some quick tips before we wrap it on how to set healthy boundaries. Like, how do we actually do it? Well, you want to start by give yourself a 24-hour, right, decision-making policy, meaning it's easier to set a boundary and say no if you haven't already given an auto yes. So if somebody asks you to do something and you don't want to do it, or you don't know, just buy time. Just say, I have a 24-hour decision-making policy. I'll tell you in a day, which gives you, it's so much easier to say no when you haven't already said yes. And then instead of people-pleasing, right, you can talk true. Like, start to really look at direct communication as something that is your friend instead of something to be afraid of, right? If you're talking to someone and they suddenly get withdrawn in anger, instead of you just acting like it's okay, but knowing that it's not, it's you being able to say, you seemed upset by the comment that I made. What's going on? Or can you tell me what happened, right? Sometimes you'd be shocked that just asking the question, someone may tell you, but it's got to be us. If we've been the one who's kind of keeping the unhealthy, disordered boundaries going, it's sort of got to be us who are going to clean it up, And I think that you've got to get super clear as to what is your side of the street and what is not, meaning what is your responsibility? What is someone else's responsibility? So if you're a fixer, an auto fixer, which many of you are, and I know it, we cannot do this for other people. It's like you can't go to the gym for someone to cure their diabetes. You get it? We can't get results for other people, which is why we really have to just focus on keeping our eyes on our own paper. And I want you to start in low stakes situations. So you're going to start with more boundaries, but we don't have to start with the most difficult relationships we have in our lives, please. Let's just start with, people at work, more low stakes situations. And you guys, if you love talking about boundaries and health and effective communication and HFC-ness and all the things, if you love this, if you want more of this, join my membership, right? We have Q&A calls every single week. We have access to some of my signature courses. It's just amazing in there. I think you guys would love it. If you want to check out my community, go to terricole.com/TCM for Terri Cole membership. Thank you for being with me. I hope you guys have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.